Right. Yeah. So hello, everyone. I'm Fiona Appleton from the Energy Saving Trust. I do recognise a few names on the call. Some familiar face to some of you maybe, but to others that haven't come across me before. So I'm one of the regional account managers within the local government support programme team. My first slide is a little bit of an introduction to the Energy Saving Trust, which I think Pete was also going to do, so we might end up sort of complementing each other a little bit on that. But so for those of you that haven't come across the Energy Saving Trust before, we're an independent organisation working to address the climate emergency. So we work with individuals, businesses, communities, governments on various different projects to reduce carbon emissions. And we've got offices across the UK. So we work with like the devolved governments up in Scotland, across in Wales and Northern Ireland, as well as in England. And so with our transport team, as I said, I sit within the local government support programme, which I'll talk about a bit more in a minute, and kind of what we can offer local authorities from that perspective. We've also got the fleet team, which is what the team that Pete sits within, so he'll talk a bit more about that later. And also, James already mentioned the local electric vehicle infrastructure scheme, so we manage that on behalf of government as well. And again, I'll talk about that a little bit more if you haven't already heard of that. So that's the introduction. And as James said, I was going to do a very sort of brief policy overview. Probably quite a lot of this will be familiar to you, but so I guess the first slide is around, why the push for electric vehicles, why are we talking about electric vehicles? So as you'll all be aware, the UK has committed by law to be net zero by 2050, and as part of that, there is currently a commitment to end the sale of new petrol and diesel vehicles by 2035, also known as a ZEV mandate. So the table on the bottom right-hand corner shows kind of the sort of phased approach really to get to 2035 and that kind of 100% switch over to electric vehicles. So by next year, we're looking at sort of 28% of cars and 16% of vans, ramping up to sort of 80 and 70 5 years later. And then by 2035, that sort of 100% target. And when the government set this, obviously this was the previous government set this commitment. They were very much keen on obviously establishing a carbon-free travel and transport network, looking at mitigating climate change, reducing pollution, particularly around air pollution. Electric vehicles have that benefit as well, particularly in cities, and then growing the green economy was a priority for them as well. But moving forward to kind of the current government, and kind of some of the commitments that the Labour government has mentioned so far. So one big thing which you'll probably be aware of is they have suggested that they might consider changing the date for the zero emission vehicle mandate and push it forward to 2030, which it was originally. Obviously the Tory government moved it to 2035. They're talking about bringing it forward to 2030 again. I don't think anything's been sort of finalised about that yet, but there has certainly been talk about that, and that will obviously have a massive knock-on effect to either electric vehicle uptake or obviously EV charging infrastructure as well, and kind of the rollout of that. They've also talked about kind of improving consumer information for those people purchasing vehicles, and this idea of having an electric vehicle confident label, which would just sort of give you a bit more information about kind of the status of the battery, kind of the range that the vehicle might have, just a bit more information that might be beneficial for consumers when they're kind of looking at vehicles and trying to compare them, or just understand kind of what it is about that particular vehicle. They're also keen on developing the domestic battery manufacturing capacity, and potentially using the new National Wealth Fund to kind of part finance some of those. So the idea of putting in sort of more gigafactories and being able to, the UK being kind of able to manufacture its own batteries and have that as a sort of growing industry for the UK. They're looking at removing barriers in the planning system and sort of speeding up decisions around that, and obviously that will help with any infrastructure projects, but also some of the maybe potentially EV charging infrastructure projects. And also, which we'll probably come on to a bit more, and as James sort of alluded to, kind of the grid, they're talking about facilitating an upgrade to the national transmission infrastructure, just to make it easier. So there's, maybe more headroom, easier to install EV infrastructure and other net zero infrastructure on the electricity network. So kind of they've identified that that's obviously a blocker, and that's something that they need to look at as well. More recently, obviously in the budget last week, there was an announcement of further funding to accelerate EV charge point rollout, so 200 million in next financial year. We don't really know the details of that, but it would be to support local authorities with on-street charge points, which is very similar to the aims of the LEVI fund, which I'll talk about in a minute. But yeah, we'll hopefully hear a bit more about what that will look like. And then 120 million pounds in next year's funding to support the purchase of new electric vans via the plug-in vehicle grant, which is an existing grant, but hopefully to sort of kind of ensure that that can kind of carry on for a little bit longer, and also something around sort of manufacturing of wheelchair accessible EVs as well, and supporting that a little bit. So there's some of the highlights of things that were mentioned specifically about kind of EVs and EV charging. So that's the policy. And as we've mentioned a few times, the LEVI fund, or Local Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Fund, we like an acronym, calling it LEVI. So this is a UK government fund that supports local authorities to kind of increase the rollout of electric vehicle charging in their area, very much kind of looking at trying to increase the commercialization of this charging infrastructure as well. So it's focused on public charge points, very much focused on those charge points that would be used by residents, particularly that don't have access to off-street parking, because they see that as an area that isn't particularly commercial, isn't something that charge point operators would volunteer to do otherwise, so that it does need that extra grant funding to be available, just to kind of kickstart the market a little bit more. So the fund includes some capital funding, which James mentioned, which has been allocated to all local authorities, kind of tier 1 authorities or combined authorities within the Northwest. And that's to contribute to the cost of delivering the actual charge points, putting them in the ground. And then there's a, which is quite unusual for government funding, but some capability funding as well, so some revenue funding to actually help pay for officers that can help deliver these projects, because it was identified that if we really wanted to push the rollout of EV charging, that's all very well, but if there isn't capacity and resources within local authorities to actually do these projects, then it doesn't really go very far. So this has luckily led to lots and lots of new posts being put in place in local authorities, and new officers starting that can then help with this delivery as well. And our role, along with our partners, Cenex and PA Consulting, as what we're calling the LEVI support body. So we help provide tools, training, and sharing of best practice. So Energy Saving Trust has a sort of kind of, we're the first point of contact really for local authorities in most cases. Cenex expertise is more on the sort of technical side of things, and PA Consulting have been brought in to help very much with the procurement side and that kind of legal procurement expertise. So yeah, and as a partnership, we're kind of supporting this fund, certainly for the next financial year. And so, yeah, I said that we sit, or myself and colleagues sit within the local government support programme within the Energy Saving Trust. So we've been running, we predate LEVI, so we've been running, I was kind of one of the first officers to join the team, been running for 6 years now, supporting local authorities, and we've sort of slowly adjusted kind of some of the support that we offer. We very much try and tailor it to what local authorities' requirements are and what their needs are, and if they request something new, then we can kind of look at that and try and accommodate that for them. But yeah, we sort of categorized, I guess, our main core offer that we provide for local authorities in sort of different areas. So things like preparing for action, so engaging people and stakeholders, some advice around that. advice around behaviour change, if local authorities want to do awareness raising events, or what's quite popular is myth busting sessions that we do. We often do like lunchtime sessions for local authorities, maybe aimed at officers or maybe their residents, doing some myth busting around electric vehicles. Unfortunately, there's quite a lot of myths around in the press and things like that around electric vehicles, and just trying to kind of bust some of those and provide more information and more details about kind of what's right and what's wrong around some of those things, those areas, and then increasingly a lot around accessibility. And the Office for Zero Emission Vehicles has asked us to kind of take a lead on accessibility and looking at how the implications of that for electric vehicle infrastructure. There is also a standard now called PAS 1899, a British standard for what electric vehicles should look like in order to make them accessible. And so we're helping local authorities navigate that a little bit as well and understand that. I've got a colleague, Abby, in the team who looks at technical support, so does lots of kind of mapping, can help with identifying sites, analysing current usage for charge points, understanding kind of future demand and kind of locations that you might want to put charge points in, and kind of trying to build kind of expertise within local authorities as well. So the information that, or the kind of knowledge that she's got, she's trying to kind of pass that on to local authority officers as well. And we do a lot around strategies and development of those, helping support local authorities with that. So they've got like a focus of where they're going to kind of go what they're going to prioritise with their electric vehicle infrastructure. So we kind of help develop workshops, and we've got templates, and we can review draft strategies. We don't unfortunately have the resources to actually write them, but we can kind of help handhold any local authorities doing that. Procurement, which is a big one, slightly removed from the LEVI grant funding procurement, because that's slightly more complex, as anyone that's involved in it on the call will understand. But kind of more broader than that, we can kind of help try and understand like kind of the market, if you wanted to do some soft market testing, write a specification, anything like that. And we have historically done that quite a lot for sort of smaller projects that local authorities have done. Keeping in touch, so we very much try and do things like this, which is kind of connect offices together, so that there's like sharing of best practice and kind of sharing questions and sort of feedback and things like that. So we have quarterly forums with local authority officers, and we get sort of over 100 officers coming along to that with various roles, but often focused on electric vehicle charging. We've got a Teams channel, which I think has got over 400 officers on it. Again, very similar. People post questions and people kind of respond to them, provide kind of advice and things like that on there. And then we've got a newsletter as well that goes around just sort of picking out kind of relevant information and news, and if we've got new support and stuff like that. And then finally, sort of newer for this year, or kind of in the last year or so, we've been doing some stuff around kind of councillor awareness, again going back to some of that myth busting, or just kind of helping improve knowledge around councillors, certainly for officers to get some of these projects signed off, or to maybe facilitate if residents come to councillors with comments or questions about what why is the council doing this and why they're doing that, for them to be a bit more informed about this space, which is still quite a new area of work. Likewise with sort of community engagement, trying to help some of those conversations and help officers sort of navigate those. And then finally, something that I was just talking to Liverpool City Region about this morning, about kind of looking at training for officers that maybe aren't doing this day to day, but it does have a knock-on effect to their work. So this sort of projects like this tend to sort of then have draw in lots of other teams, so highways, parking, legal, procurement, that kind of thing, and so that just to make sure that they're kind of up to speed with kind of some of these areas of work and kind of understand them a bit better to make these projects more successful. We're offering some support around kind of information sessions and training for them as well. And then just final slide from me, a little bit about kind of some of the projects we've been working on. So I tried to focus this on some of the councils in the local areas. So with Sefton Council, I did a kind of lunch and learn session with them. So they had like a team session within sort of transport, talking about kind of what their priorities might be. And I did a bit of myth busting there and things like that, and sort of supported them with that. Assisted them, or in the process assisting them with developing their EV strategy. And we've also, my colleague with sort of their GIS mapping has done some support around their sort of site selection and identifying sites that they might want to take forward for charging infrastructure. Recently with Warrington, I did a Go Electric kind of myth busting event for staff, as I talked about. So that was like a lunchtime session. Stockport back last year supported a business event that they had talking about EVs. And then while I think that was like last year, one of my colleagues did for Lancashire County Council, did a procurement workshop as well. So yeah, just a bit of a flavour of some of the things that we've done for some of the councils in this area. I think that's it from me. That's my kind of contact details and the web page, but if we share the slides, you'll be able to have a look at that if you want to find out a little bit more.